Let's continue to get reaction to announcements on the investments to resolve the country's water crisis with WaterCan Executive Director, Dr. Ferrial Adam. Good morning. Welcome to Newzroom Afrika.
Good morning, and good morning to your viewers. Thank you for having me on your show.
Doctor, how confident is WaterCan that the government will deliver on its commitments to invest in water infrastructure and address the country's water challenges?
Well, there's good and there's bad in the president's statement, but I think if you're saying how confident we are, it's not going to happen in the next year. And that, unfortunately, is the reality. There's no way we're going to reach that statement where we're going to get water to everyone in the next year. So we need time frames. And that is the challenge.
What would it take? I mean, what specific steps does WaterCan think that the government needs to take to ensure that its promises on water management are realized?
So the first one was actually something the president said, and we're very happy about that because it's about ring fencing money for water and sanitation. And that is something we've been calling for a year. So we think that having focused budget that looks at water and sanitation would then be able to deal with some of the challenges. What we think we should be doing is putting a lot more on the municipal level and emphasis on the municipal level. Because in the budget speech, the president talks about the 7 big infrastructure projects, right? But the reality is, even if you have those 7 big infrastructure projects, the water in the rivers are still being polluted by the wastewater treatment works across the country that are not working. And that is at a municipal level. So that needs to get some level of emphasis and kind of urgency that we're seeing. I think that it's really good as well. It needs to be said that the minister has put this in his speech as water, and water is now on the table as an urgent issue. And I think that is very important for us.
And does WaterCan believe that the government's plans for water management are sufficient to address the scale and the urgency of the crisis, or are additional measures needed over and above what you have described?
So I think definitely additional measures are needed. Not enough was, so one of the things we have to also deal with within the water sector is the corruption and the mismanagement. So this growing mafia of water tanks, we need to be able to reduce that and provide sustainable good supply. And what's needed there is a focus on a municipal level to actually develop and improve infrastructure. That's the key thing. We need to do it at the bottom to make sure that infrastructure is improved. And we have to start now. I mean, if you just take Johannesburg, we have half of our reservoirs are leaking. Cape Town has wastewater treatment works that are not functioning. You know, it's across the country. That is where the money is needed, and that's where the focus. The president talked about an infrastructure fund. Now, the details of that are not clear for us at WaterCan, but what we're saying is we need more information, and with this whole plan, we need better monitoring and checks in place so that we avoid what happened in Hammanskraal, where the money was allocated and then disappeared and no repairs were done. So we're saying at the same time, we need better checks and balances in place to make sure and monitor that things are happening. Also, it's not good enough to say we have these plans. We need timelines, when things are going to start, who's getting the contract, how it's going to be managed, all of that. And then I think a big thing that people forget in government is that civil society voices, while they annoy you, are there to provide guidance, are there to advise. And we need to take that into account when we have these kind of big projects in place.
All right. Now, it's clear that you do not think that the president has provided enough clarity and details on how the government plans to tackle this crisis. So how will WaterCan measure the success of the government's efforts to address South Africa's water challenges? And what benchmarks will be used to evaluate progress?
So we'll be monitoring firstly as a start, the budget allocation. So we're waiting for the budget speech to see if the budget allocations actually align to what is being said in this speech. We will then try to push, if there's not enough being done at a local government level, we will continue to raise awareness. We'll continue to, if it protest or whatever needs to happen, to raise awareness at a local government level where municipalities are just not doing their job. The third thing we would like to see is that the people in charge of water treatment or wastewater treatment, that's all the levels, whether it's the MMCs, the management, the mayors, if they're not doing their job, we want to see them being fired. And that is how we are going to measure what is going on. Also, the way we have a benchmark, right? We have the blue drop, green drop, and no drop reports, which gives us an idea of where we are in terms of drinking water, water leaks, and sewage. The next report comes out at the end of this year. So we will use that to monitor whether we're deteriorating or whether there's an improvement.
You've also stated that licensing is pointless without monitoring and enforcement, right? So can you provide more information about what you think is currently lacking in terms of monitoring and enforcement of water licenses?
So it was not really the monitoring of, it is monitoring water use license. What happened, so I need to just give a little bit of background, is that we went through a period where even the national government was not working really well. So there was almost a 5-year backlog of people getting water use license. Now, if you run anything, any kind of company, etc., you need a water use license if you're going to be using water to explain how you're going to do it. So they fast-tracked the water use licenses, and they didn't check what, if I say, okay, I have a company and I will have this much effluent into the water, they're not checking if I'm doing more than that. And that's what we're finding. So, for example, we've seen a company, we've seen the Yuxke, or is it the Henops, where there was red paint, blue paint, yellow paint, and no one can figure out who released that into the rivers. There's oil being released into rivers. So when you give these water use licenses, that's great. But if you just don't check and you don't monitor and see what people are actually throwing or what the effluent is, then what you're doing is you're giving them a license to pollute. And that is our concern, because there aren't enough environmental monitors on the ground to be able to, and experienced, to go to places to take water samples and to make sure that people are not polluting.
And what are the other significant risks to water quality in South Africa, and how can they be resolved?
So the main risk for us is your wastewater treatment works, which almost 70% of them are not working well. So what you're getting is raw sewage flowing into the rivers and streams. We also concerned that when they're testing for water, they're not looking for the kind of things that go with E. coli. So there are other pathogens like cholera or hepatitis that needs to be monitored more regularly. So when you think about it, 10% of our population are living off the rivers and streams. That's their water supply. And in most cases, they polluted. So it's going to affect health. And as you see, in terms of tap water, we have less than 50% of the water systems are safe for drinking. So people can't drink the water from their tap. So it actually links to health. We're concerned about health. It links to your food system. Because if you're using dirty water for agriculture or small farmers, you are affecting your food and creating illness. So those are the kinds of things we're worried about in terms of quality that we say needs the attention and the finance that the president is talking about.
And in terms of all these things that you are rightfully worried about, given the current state of water infrastructure and treatment facilities, how confident is WaterCan that the water supply to households and communities is safe for consumption?
I think that is dependent on where you're living. So if you in city of Johannesburg, I have confidence that our drinking water is safe for drinking. There would be pockets, but I don't think there's many of that. We've been monitoring. The big cities, Cape Town, Durban, I would say your water is safe to drink. If you start moving out of the Gauteng, Western Cape, and out of Cape Town, your tap water is a problem. Northern Cape is a problem, Free State, Northwest. And we've known this for years, right? Mpumalanga, That's why the Dipalaseng municipality was taken to court last year. So there are lots of areas where people cannot drink the water from the taps. What is worrying for us is that the municipality will sometimes not even let people know that they should not be drinking their water. And in other cases, they will let them know you cannot drink the water, but there's no action to actually remedy the situation. So for years in Mpumalanga, places like Balfour and Carolina, people can't drink the water from their taps.